Hi everyone, I'm going to get started now. Thanks for being here and thanks for having me. My name is Geary, and I'm excited to talk today about some of the challenges and opportunities about making socially critical work using data visualization and mapping. I'll tell you a bit about myself first. I'm a data scientist at a startup called CitySwifter. CitySwifter is a business intelligence platform for urban bus networks. So I focus on predictive modeling, analytics, and visualization for clients in the bus industry. Previously, I worked as a data scientist at the UN focusing on quantitative analysis for conflict, and I interned at MapSen focusing on mobility research. I did a data science master's from Columbia and finished that last year, and I'm passionate about open source software, geography, transportation, and all these things we're going to be talking about. So when I first started experimenting with processing for data visualization, I wasn't thinking about making socially critical work at all. I was interested in mapping transportation systems. So I'll show a few of those projects quite quickly. I could talk all the whole time about this, but I'm not going to. So if you're interested in transit data specifically, feel free to reach out to me after. Yep, so I had the chance to work at MapSen, and I made this project using processing in a library called Unfolding Maps that I called Transit Flow, and it enables you to generate these sort of animated transit schedule maps anywhere in the world that has publicly available transit data. You enter the geographic bounding box that you're interested in, and it will generate these maps. So in this case, every blue dot is a bus, every red dot is a subway, yellow dots are trains, and the pink dots are ferries. And this reflects the transit schedule. It doesn't reflect real-world deviations from the schedule. And then along the bottom, you get these counts of at any moment during the day how many buses, trains, ferries are scheduled to be in motion. So I got kind of obsessed with this, and I made a whole bunch of projects of these around the world. This is Bay Area. Here's Chicago. I got asked by Le Monde newspaper to do one for Paris, so I added some Parisian sounding music to it. And this is all open source, so I want to pause this one. A number of people have built things on top of it. This is an audioization of Toronto transit flows by a graduate student in Toronto named Rami Saab. He wrote a script on top of it to set number of subways to pitch, number of buses to tempo, and number of streetcars to volume, which I thought was kind of cool. This is work that I did last year, but I recently came back to it to make this map showing scheduled transit movements along the Boston-Washington corridor. So you can see Washington, D.C. in the lower left, Boston in the upper right, and then sort of the beating heart of the New York City subway in the middle, which I enjoyed. This is missing a few towns in Pennsylvania, so if you're from Lancaster or Reading, I'm sorry that I don't have your bus data. So just briefly how this works, it's pulling transit data from Transitland, which is it's sort of like a Wikipedia for transit routes and timetables, sponsored by MapSen. It gets the data using a Python script, and then it visualizes it using processing and then a library called Unfolding Maps, which is by a German researcher named Till Nagel, I think you pronounce his name. It's really wonderful. It makes it easy to sort of translate lat line coordinates to screen positions and sort of updates maps and stuff like that. And if you're interested in transit data, GTFS is the schema for describing transit schedules and routes. If you want to talk about it later, feel free to find me. Anyone want to guess what city this is? Yeah, Beijing. This is the day of taxi trajectories in Beijing. And then for my work, I build interactive maps for bus network operators and schedulers. So we do predictions for ridership and journey times, and we build tools to let our clients analyze historical data and then view the predictions that we have for future. So here you're seeing These are actual onboardings by bus stop, and you can toggle between viewing the actual viewing versus viewing what we had predicted would happen. So here I'm using P5.js on top of Mapbox, and there's a really great library from Cristobal Valenzuela, I think you pronounce his name, who did the NYU ITP program that lets you draw P5.js on top of a map. So here we're viewing outbound versus inbound trips. And also with P5.js, this is our passenger demand explorer, so we do modeling to try to guess where people are getting off of the bus. And then we serve it up in this interactive map for the client to understand our model's predictions on those trajectories. I'm just going to skip through some of this stuff. So if you're interested in transit, talk to me later. So when I started doing this kind of work, I thought it was really fun and exciting to sort of get this kind of God's eye view of a city mobility system. But it turns out that is quite problematic and also an illusion that maps are good at making. A quote from Donna Haraway, Situated Knowledges, she says, "The view of infinite vision is an illusion, a God trick." And this really resonated with me when I first came across it because I kind of realized that I was getting excited about mapping because it made me feel like I was flying above the earth as if I had this bodiless, neutral perspective, which is obviously an illusion and a dangerous one at that. More from Donna Haraway, "Vision in this technological feast becomes unregulated gluttony. All seems not just mythically about the God trick of seeing everything from nowhere, but to have the myth put into ordinary practice. And like the God trick, this eye fucks the world to make techno monsters." And when I read this, I was a bit worried that, am I becoming a techno monster by playing with this God trick like I had been doing? And there's work from Catherine D'Ignazio at MIT on feminist data visualization, and she says that even when we rationally know that data visualizations do not represent the whole world, we forget the facts and accept charts as facts because they are generalized, scientific, and seem to present an expert, neutral point of view. And I think this is really powerful. And indeed, sort of the history of maps, they have been used as sort of a canvas for colonial projects. Here's the earliest obtainable map of the whole continent in Africa, 1554, by a German cartographer. And this is a 1917 map, color-coded to show what European power owned what area. This is a 1942 map from the US Army, touting their mapping department. It says, "Maps are weapons. Good maps make good plans, no maps, no plans." And here's the 1949 Green Line separating Israel and Palestine, Gaza and the West Bank. It was called the Green Line because it was literally drawn with a green marker in 1949. So the points, lines, and polygons that we put on maps are not just objective reductions of the world, but they're actively changing the world that we live in. So with all of this baggage that maps have, why should we be interested in using them to create socially critical work? Is it even possible to do so? The first project that I got really excited about sort of in this area is from Laura Kurgan. This is a 2003 project called $1 Million Blocks. So she got her hands on data from ComStat, which is the NYPD crime mapping database. This map shows prison expenditures by census block in Brooklyn in 2003. So she says, rather than looking at where crimes are committed, we looked at where prisoners live, and the maps that resulted showed the urban cost of incarceration and suggested how those dollars might be better spent on investing in communities. So she goes on to zoom in on particular blocks that she deems $1 million blocks. Here we see New York State spent $17 million to imprison 109 people from these 17 blocks of Brownsville, Brooklyn in 2003. And she goes on to say that our primary discovery was that crime mapping tools that the NYPD was using were part of the problem rather than part of the solution. We were still making maps and doing it with government data, but the stories that they told completely upended the prevailing narrative about crime in prison. So I really, this blew my mind when I first saw it, and I love the way that she takes a data set that is well known and official government data and turns it on its head. I think that's really exciting. So she's a professor at Columbia Architecture School, and she runs a group called the Center for Spatial Research. And I had the opportunity to work with her and that group on a project called In Plain Sight. It's a video installation that was part of the Venice Architecture Biennial. And I'm going to show a couple of clips from that now. So I worked as a research assistant on this. The goal here was to investigate inequalities in electricity, consumption, production, and access using satellite imagery and that famous blue marble, like nighttime lights data set. Nighttime lights generated by a copper mine in the Congo. So you're seeing a power line connecting a dam on the left-hand side of the screen to the copper mine in the lower right. And you're seeing cities and villages and towns along the way that don't have access to the power that's running right through their towns. So these towns and cities are populations of 40,000, 400,000, over 2 million. So they don't show up when you look at the nighttime lights data set. But obviously there are lots of people living there. Whereas at those two bright spots, there are populations of 0. So we use computer vision to scan the whole globe and find sort of a collection of these types of anomaly sites. Those are all the different extraction sites associated with that Swiss mining company. I'm going to show one more clip from the same project. Okay, so here we're doing a comparison of the recovery post-hurricane, comparing Houston and Puerto Rico. Immediately after the storm, on the left is Houston. That's 11 days. And then after the storm on the right is Puerto Rico. Days later, still 95% without power. So that experience got me excited about data visualization for making social critical work, and I wanted to do some of that on my own. So I'll show a few projects that I've made over the past 6 months. The first two focus on military arms trade. There's a database from SIPRI, which is Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. They have a free and open database that they call Arms Transfers Database that tracks global major military weapons transfers, so not small guns, but larger things, from 1950 to 2017. So the first map that I made focuses on the US export specifically. The US is and has been the world's largest exporter, so I chose to start there. Each dot represents a trend indicator value, which is a system that SIPRI designed to facilitate the comparison between different classes of weapons. It's quite complicated, so if you're interested, I would recommend checking it out on their website. I decided to color code those dots. Each dot represents one trend indicator value, color coded by the continent of the recipient country. And on the left, there's this bar chart that tells you the top 10 recipients in every decade. So at the beginning of the new decade, it resets. And I chose to do that to sort of call out, or make it easier to understand how things have changed over time. I chose to annotate the fact that Iran in the 70s, it has been an all-time high, because I thought that may be surprising to people. Within a week of putting this on Twitter and Vimeo, it had gotten like 5 million views, which was astounding to me. The foreign minister of Iran tweeted about it, which was wild. And it really just, it gave me, I don't know, a sense of sort of the power that comes with visualizing data in a way that's accessible and enticing to the viewer, but also the responsibility associated with this. Some people ask, why didn't you make like an interactive dashboard to investigate this topic? And actually, many people already have done that. There's one from Google Creative Lab that does a similar thing. I specifically wanted to make a video that I could put onto social media feeds that is only a minute or two. That sort of lowers the bar to entry. Sometimes if there's like a complicated dashboard, it doesn't look good on your phone, you have to load it on a browser and learn how to use it. Whereas this, it's almost like it just pops up on, on Twitter or something, and it's hard to not engage with it rather than you needing to opt in to engage with it. So that's that video, and there was a lot of people that were interested in seeing this for other countries, so this is sort of an ongoing project. I have done one more that compares US and Russia. I chose to add music to this one because it's a bit longer and I wanted to hold people's interest, so I chose a song from each decade to sort of mark the passing of time.
See that guy with the red suspenders, driving that car with the bright red fenders. I know one of those heavy spenders, yes, that's Communist Joe. He's selling my gal with propaganda.
So I think it's really fascinating the way to sort of put that in the spatial context of geopolitics between US and Russia. You can really see the way that East and West Europe is divided by sort of weapons trade as a proxy for political allegiance. You can see quite clearly, the divide of North and South Korea. You can see the USSR sending weapons to Cuba starting in the 60s.
What's going down? Evil minds that plot destruction.
I couldn't edit this one.
Sorcerer of death's construction. In the fields of bodies burning. As the war machine keeps turning. Death and hatred to mankind. Starting on surf and fiction. Starting on surf and know that it ain't no. Starting on surf on its never the bomb. Talking slowly, the napalm star. The only ones to the blood. It must be something to get from blood. Don't you fist the air of blood.
So you can really see USSR when that collapses, the Russian arms trade drops significantly. This pie chart on the left shows the annual overview for the world, so you can see every country into other buckets. Because I wanted to focus on these two, but so you see Saudi Arabia as the So one thing that I did differently, there was a lot of confusion on the first map. I think I was guilty of sort of assuming, I don't know, that people had more geographic training than I should have. So for example, I'm using country centroids to represent a country. Obviously, all the weapons aren't going to Saskatchewan, which raised a few questions. People were like, what is happening in Saskatchewan? And same with Australia, although I did learn that there is a CIA, US CIA and Australian military base right in the middle of Australia named Pine Gap. So maybe there's some truth in that one, but I'm interested in this idea of data disclaimers, because if you're the one visualizing data, you're sort of putting yourself in this kind of God's eye view trick that we were talking about. So how do you limit the potential confusion or to sort of, I guess, limit the potential damage that your work could do? Because I think it's possible to have a concept, and technologists love to get excited about the work that they're doing and how much good it could do, but how could this data be used incorrectly or for bad? So this idea of a data disclaimer, I'm excited about. So I'm trying to proactively respond to questions and listing all the different types of arms that are included in the map, because that was a question that was unanswered, the first one that a lot of people had. And I'm highlighting the fact that it does not cover drones and small arms. I talked a bit about how CIPRI gathers this data, and some of the notes and exceptions. So country borders don't change over time. Obviously, that's not true in the real world. I'm using country centroids. So I think if you're doing data visualization, especially if you're trying to sort of instigate contentious conversations, I think it's important to focus on what the data doesn't show. Because if you're working with data as a medium, you're limited by the fact that you can only work with things that have been recorded and that are quantifiable. So what does the data not show in that map? Well, it doesn't show any arms transfers that are unrecorded or secretive, which obviously is like a crucial topic, or arms that have been resold. It only captures the first sale. It does not capture by what mode and what route arms are being transferred. They're obviously not flying along these arcs. It doesn't get at what do the arms look like in real life. You know, they're not blue and red dots. I'm choosing 2 countries only, and it doesn't get at where arms are stored prior to or after the transfer. So I think data visualization and maps are good at establishing some context, but you know, oftentimes the most interesting and important questions are questions that can only be answered through qualitative research. So I'm interested in this kind of interdisciplinary approach that can hopefully combine those 2 things. Just one, I guess, technical question I had on this was like, how are you drawing those arcs? So I'm using the library and processing called unfolding maps to get the base map. And then the lines that I'm drawing, I'm using the processing Bezier curve function. Bezier, like B-E-Z-I-E-R, I think that's how you pronounce it. For most countries, I'm just picking, like you establish a start point and a stop point, and then 1 or 2 control points along the way to inform what the curve looks like. For most of the country relationships, I'm generating those control points just using a little bit of randomness. But for a few particular country relationships, like US, this sort of swoop that goes south to Taiwan and Japan and South Korea from the US, I manually entered those control points because I didn't want to be overlapping South Africa or too much of Brazil. So I chose a few to do manually. Most of them were generated just applying a bit of randomness to the average of the start and stop point. And then to actually move the dot, people probably have familiarity with the linear interpolation lerp function, but that's all that's happening here. So that's sort of like the pie chart aspect of it. The first map, I did not ask CIPRI for any input or approval to use their data. I just went and did it. And it got a lot of traction, so they had reached out about it and had appreciated it. So I sort of worked with them a bit closer on the second one. They had the idea of doing the pie chart to sort of give context, because there may have been confusion on the US one that the US was the only country engaging in this, and obviously that's not true. So that sort of prompted me to work on this kind of animated pie chart concept, which I ended up applying to this project. So this is a visualization showing US federal government outlays from 1964 through the present and through, I think, projected through 2020. So on the left is discretionary spending, which is spending that comes up to vote every year. Sort of confusingly named mandatory spending is spending that is voted on over more than 1 year, so it's not actually mandatory, but it's changeable. But my intention here was to sort of highlight, obviously I chose the color red to make the military slice of discretionary spending pop. And this is not like a neutral project. My intention was to highlight how much the US government spends on military. That was the bailout right here. You can see it popping there.
Where did you get the data from this?
So this comes from the Office of Management and Budget. I'll talk a bit about that, I guess. So they have PDF reports of this stuff. So I downloaded a bunch, I copied and pasted them into CSV files, and then I visualized that with processing. When I'm working with data, I'm usually working with Python and Jupyter notebooks. I find it like a really sort of easy way to experiment with data interactively, and then if I want to make something like this, I'll render a CSV with processing. So this got a bunch of feedback that made me really excited. This is a professor from Harvard and Michigan. I'm teaching fiscal policy tomorrow, and I'm so excited to have found this awesome visualization of discretionary spending over time. These graphs will change the game in the first week of all my undergrad courses. So that makes me feel really happy. Just thinking about the fact that high school or college students could be consuming the work that I'm putting out there is really exciting, because that's part of what I'm trying to get at is a lot of this information I didn't become aware of until college. So I'm thinking, how can I make work high schoolers could engage with? Sometimes I think if you're going to do socially critical work using data, you have to sometimes, well, one, you always have to be critical of your own work, and I think you need to ask, how could this be used in the wrong way? How can my work be used to do harm? And sometimes you do work and you choose not to share it. So this was a project that I posted, I put online, and based on some feedback I got, I decided to delete it. So I'm showing, there's all this talk about crisis at the southern border, so I was curious, what does data actually say about that? So I went to US Customs and Border Protection and mapped apprehensions at the US-Mexico border from 1960 through present year. So each dot represents a particular region as classified by CBP. They get bigger as number of apprehensions goes up, and then along the bottom is this bar chart that shows you the number of apprehensions in a particular year. And one of the reasons that I chose to remove this is that, well, what if somebody only wanted to show, the years of 1970 through 1986? They could be using this to support the claim that there's this crisis at the border and that border crossings are rising. It's not until you actually get to the very end where you see that border apprehensions in 2017 were at their lowest since 1972. So that would require someone to watch the whole video sort of in good faith to arrive at the point that I was trying to make. And I didn't want to risk people not doing that, and I didn't want to see this on Fox News as like proof that there's a crisis at the border, so I decided to just delete it. And this is a project that I'm still working on, so I haven't shared it, but I'll share it now for the first time. There's been obviously so much talk about Russian interference in US elections, and so I asked myself, why is there not more talk about the US's own history of doing this to other countries? So I found a data set, it's called Partisan Election Interference by the Global Powers, which was referring to just US and Russia, by a Carnegie Mellon political scientist named Dov Levin. So this is online and it's freely available. He recorded, I think as his PhD project thesis, all known partisan election interference events by the US and USSR/Russia from 1946 through 2000. That's also a PDF, so I copied it into a spreadsheet and visualized this with processing.
I believe that the fundamental basis for a happy life with family and friends is to treat others as you would like to be treated.
This is Harry
Speak
Truman.
truthfully, act honorably, and keep commitments to the letter. In public life, I have always believed that right will prevail. It has been my policy to obtain the facts, all the facts possible, then to make the decision in the public interest and to carry it out. If the facts justify the decision at the time it is made, it will always be right. A public man should not worry constantly about the verdict of history or what future generations will say about him. He must live in the present, make his decisions for the right on the facts as he sees them, and history will take care of itself. I believe a public man must know the history and the background of his state and his nation.
Yes, let us pray for the salvation of all of those who live in that totalitarian darkness. Pray they will discover the joy of knowing God. But until they do, let us be aware that while they preach the supremacy of the state, declare its omnipotence over individual man, and predict its eventual domination of all peoples on the earth, they are the focus of evil in the modern world. It was C.S. Lewis who, in his unforgettable Screwtape letters, wrote, "The greatest evil is not done now in those sordid dens of crime that Dickens loved to paint. It is not even done in concentration camps and labor camps. In those, we see its final result. But it is conceived and ordered, moved, seconded, carried in, minuted, in clear, carpeted, warmed, and well-lighted offices by quiet men with white collars and cut fingernails and smooth-shaven cheeks who do not need to raise their voice."
I'll never apologize for the United States of America. Ever. I don't care what the facts are. I will lead her. I will do my level best to stand up for freedom and democracy around the world by keeping the United States of America strong and by keeping our eyes wide open as we welcome change in the world, but keeping our eyes wide open.
I believe that the fundamental basis for
I suppose the sort of theme behind these few projects is that I'm seeking gaps in what I perceive to be sort of voids in the collective consciousness, at least that I can see in my own communities and in myself, and I'm trying to make work that fills those gaps. So just quickly on tools that I use and that I've mentioned already. For the video animations, I use processing with Unfolding Maps library. For some of the interactive web stuff on the transit stuff I showed you, I use P5.js with Mapbox. And there's a library called mappa.js that makes it easy to get these two things talking to each other.
Did you call it Mappa?
Sorry? Mappa.js with two P's. Yeah, it's great. It's from an I2P student, Cristobal Valenzuela.
M-A-P-P-A?
Yeah, Mappa.js. And then for working with spatial data, I like using Python. A few libraries in particular that are handy. Has anyone heard of Pandas library for data analysis? A few people have. There's one called GeoPandas that is the same, but for working with spatial data, points, lines, and polygons. Shapely for geometric analysis and manipulation. And there's one amazing one called OSMNX, which lets you download street networks from OpenStreetMap and work with street data directly. So I'll stop there. I have a few minutes for questions, so thanks.
What do you do then? And also, is like, do you find that you come up with ideas based on knowing what data is out there and then decide to visualize it? Or?
For this work, I think it's important to start with the question rather than to just start with what data you can get your hands on, because starting with the proxy itself is potentially a recipe for disaster. Yeah, I have a number of questions that they come to my head. Essentially, like, I'm asking what did I wish I knew, learned in middle school and high school that took me much longer to understand. So I'm trying to make work that my past self may have appreciated. One example of not being able to find data, researching sort of the relationship between U.S. gun sales and Mexican drug cartels. You know, because there's all this rhetoric of drugs coming off the border, but what about all the guns that we are selling to enable the cartels to maintain their dominance? And the alcohol, tobacco, firearms in the U.S. government, they do have all these reports of that like 75% of Mexican drug cartels guns come from U.S. Gun shops. Where exactly they're going and from where exactly, I don't know, so I wouldn't be able to make like an animated app about that, but I'm playing around with that idea. But if I can't find the data, then that means that a data-centric project may not be the best option. Yeah.
Can you just go back 2 slides and show us those were for people at this webbox? Lower first.
Yeah, unfolding maps is what I'm using to get the base maps and convert lab lawn coordinates to screen positions.
I'm wondering, in terms of when you think about what questions to ask, like also how you pull out what relationships you want to represent. So like the visualization on the apprehensions at the border, like how you think about what you want to pull out that is driving that, like whether it's over time or changing Mexico, things like that.
Right. Yeah, so I mean, everything happens somewhere in space and somewhere in time. So what I'm trying to do is capture both space and time at once. So, I mean, technically I'm looking for timestamps and latitude, longitude coordinates. And I'm trying to tie those together to tell a story. Because like this is not, new information. People know that, that actually border apprehensions as a proxy for total border crossings is low. So I wanted to, but if you just use a bar chart to sort of reduce everything into just like a bar chart, there's lots that you're missing the geographic context of the border, the fact that it's huge and that there are all these different crossing points. So I was trying to show both at the same time, space and time at once. Yep.
I think the data visualization is very good in terms of correlations, right? It's very easy to pick up correlation. But how do you think you could implement the causation behind these correlations? Like how could
Yeah.
I believe that the fun
It's for the United States of America.
It's a great
other
question.
than implementing the biases that you may personally bring to these correlations.
Yeah, so that is one thing data is not great at doing, is getting at causality. And I'm looking at these projects as a means of starting a conversation and maybe giving domain experts a bit of fuel. For example, the weapons map, Al Jazeera, I worked with them to create like an explainer type of video where they interviewed domain experts on the topic. Essentially, I think you need qualitative research to get at that. And that is not really my own domain. I'm trying to tee people up that do have that expertise to hopefully use my work. Time's up. Okay, I'm gonna stop now, but if you want to talk more, feel free to find me afterwards. Thank you.